We're going to jump right back in with post-incarceration integration. Who came up with these titles? Post-incarceration integration. And Kenny Robinson is going to be our speaker for the next few minutes. I am with you so excited to hear from him. Kenny wants us to know that he was incarcerated at 23 years old and served a 10-year sentence in federal prison. Upon release, Kenny faced several challenges that many formerly incarcerated people face, including limited sustainable jobs or careers, no access to ID and documentation, unmet basic needs, and adequate health care, poor paying jobs. But Kenny kept pursuing what was next for him, and he eventually got a job as an automotive sales rep where he climbed very quickly to a sales manager. 10 years later, Kenny left the industry and pursued his passion for starting a nonprofit and is the founder and president of Freedom Fighting Missionaries. Mr. Robinson assists the formerly incarcerated in obtaining identification, providing job readiness courses, healthcare referrals, counseling and mental health services, financial literacy, credit coaching classes, voter registration, and community advocacy. Will you do me a favor and join me in welcoming to the platform Mr. Kenny Robinson?
Can you hear me a little bit better now? All right. Long suffering is the word that is used in the Bible. That's synonymous with the word that I chose to use here, arduous. In this journey, there's always a beginning. I was released in 2012 from federal prison. My family had relocated here from Winston-Salem area, Mount Airy area while I was away. And I chose my home plan to be Charlotte. And I chose Charlotte because my family was here, and I was under the impression that Charlotte's the biggest city in North Carolina. Surely there must be jobs there. There must be opportunities there. There must be a way for a man there in North Carolina. Charlotte's the place that you would need to be. To the contrary, that was the worst place that you could be released to, not only in North Carolina, but in the United States of America. Because at that time, Charlotte, North Carolina was ranking close to last and moving their own people forward out of poverty. Right? And here I am in poverty, and I'm black, and I have a background, and I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, the worst place that you can be. So 40 interviews, right, later, I finally did get my first job at the Goodwill minimum wage, making $7, whatever the change is, an hour. With 5 children in immediate need means like tissue. You know, toothpaste, tampons, bras and stuff like that, picture day, right? Daddy's home, and this expectation is that you are going to, cover what our mama has been doing for us for the last 10 years, right? So all of that weight is upon you. The government wants their money monthly, right? You have a fine, you have all of this stuff, right? The guys, he's coming to check on you. He's going to take your urine. All of these things that you're up against, having been home 30 days, and the expectations is there. Going to all of these different nonprofits, all of them, all 24 of them or more, right? Looking for help. And there is none, right? One place send you to the next, send you to the next, send you to the next. Churches are a part of this cycle, from one church to the next. Right? Well, we can't talk to you, sir. We have to send you over to our social justice minister. They take care of that now, right? To help people like you now, right? You don't get to talk. Click this link and sign right up. We'll get you on a prayer list. It's just the reality of these things. So in this journey, there's a beginning. So in 2020, once I decided to retire from the automotive industry and launch my nonprofit, January 2020, took my 401k savings and whatever else I had. I was going to start my own businesses, go out on my own. I had reached the glass ceiling in the business, right? I'd never owned that place. You'll never own this dealership. I don't care how hard you work. I don't care how much money you make. You'll never run this place. You'll never have your own. In fact, you'll never go no higher than what you are. You've done well, Kenny, and you ought to be happy and satisfied with that. I was not, and I retired from there and launched my nonprofit January. Here comes March of 2020, right? Coronavirus. Now, from January to March, I had been under the instruction of some nonprofit leaders here in the community because, remember, I went to all of them. And then once I became a success story, I went back and spoke for them, right? All of these nonprofits that attempted to help me, because they're just like I am now, black and needing funding, can't get it, need somebody to speak up to the banks and stuff, to the churches and stuff, in hopes of getting some funding. I did that for them. They got the funding, so now they owed me a lease to teach me the back end of nonprofits, right? Because this is a real business. Right? They're going to get your taxes and all of that stuff. You got to send in paperwork and all of that stuff. They'll check you out and all of that stuff, right? So they taught me those things. And then March came, where I had a plan to maybe assist 3 to 5 individuals as I'm building up my nonprofit and program. And then once March came and coronavirus came, April came, you on lockdown, so that quickly went up to 30, 40, 50 people, and so on and so forth. And the resources was not coming as fast as the need, right? The need is great, right? The harvest is plentiful out there, right? It'll never run out. So here we are, a new nonprofit, and there's the beginning. What do? A man, a woman, and a child is released from incarceration. And there's a first step. And on that, let's see if I can get to this first slide here. So the problem for us in 2020, exacerbated by coronavirus. First step, that person gets out, what do they need? That person needs an identification. You can't do nothing without an identification. Absolutely zero. And if you, right now, under my voice and those who are sitting out here, if you were to lose your identification, there's a way for you to get it. Right? You'd know quickly what to do. Get on your phone, get on the internet, and Google somehow, somewhere, you'd figure it out in less than 5 minutes, right? That's because you have the technology in your hand. You have the phone in your hand. You have access to those things. Identifications was such an obstacle for me because I'm building up the program myself. So I am the one who is with the person, right? And I have to try to get them logged on my phone or on my laptop in the street, right? This is coronavirus now. We're out there, literally out there, trying to hook up to some internet from the court building or something, right? Trying to get them signed up, and then identification has to come somewhere, right? It has to go to an address. Well, you don't have an address, you're homeless. So where's that going to go? Well, but maybe Kenny the homeless shelter, or maybe that, no. Well, that's your assumption that these programs and things exist, and they did not, right? So there's another obstacle. We've got through the DMV system, where's the identification going to go? And where's that person going to be at 10 days later or 15 days later when it does arrive? Who's going to find them and hand deliver it to them? That was a major obstacle for us, and one that I had to take care of. Next from there, right? So a man or a woman, a child is released from incarceration. Don't worry about a job, don't worry about housing, don't worry about none of those things if that person doesn't have health care, right? Because on the inside, you are getting provided that. There's doctors, there's nurses, there's medical attention. You're paying for it, the taxpayers, right? And that person is getting treatment. Now that person is released. Do not be under the assumption that the government or somebody has arranged those things for that individual. They have not. They have a 30-day supply of their medications if they're on medicine, and that is it. If that person was to become ill, they don't have health insurance, that person has to become so ill that they go to the emergency room in trauma, right? Because we will avoid the emergency room, don't feel sick enough to go there, right? So you'd have to get to a point where your insulin's run out, and now you've passed out, and you're in the emergency room where that's not free, where they're going to give you a bill there. And that bill right there will keep you from getting out of a 500 credit score because you have nothing. There's no mercy for you. Even if you get Medicaid, they're not going to go back and pay your old bills. It just don't work that way. So that was a major obstacle for us, just basic health care. Again, with the understanding that we would think, well, that should be simple. Well, you have a phone in your hand, you have the internet in your hand, sure, you can simply get on there and set appointments and do those things for yourself. So next from there, employment, right? So we have gotten the person identification, the person has gotten health care, and is now ready for employment. Well, what is that person's skill set? That person's been gone 7 years, 10 years, 15, 27 years in some cases. Right? Who is going to sit with that person and explain to them and help them with their resume writing, right, and their soft skills in a way that is pertinent to them, right? Because that person been away 10, 15, 27 years, may not know his skills, but I do. You worked somewhere in there. You don't get to be in prison and just don't do nothing, right? They'll just put you in a hole if you don't want to work. Right? So you're going to work. Everybody's going to get assigned a job. You've been on this job working in that factory for 7 years, sir. You know how to work on a line. You know how to take this machine down, that's a skill that we're putting on your resume. Right? They don't know that. I know that. So we, in the community, we know that. Right? We know that you don't have to put down that you was in prison. You was in the prison factory working for $1.13 maximum, started at 23 cents, and you made your way up to $1.13 in that factory, so we got to put that job skill down. And then employment training, right, which in Charlotte, North Carolina is very free and all over the place, the programs for employment training. But what doesn't come with it is the stipend, right? How am I going to survive for 3 months taking this class? Electra's a great program. HVAC, they'll help you get a job afterwards. Computer programming class, they'll help you get a job afterwards. But how am I going to survive in there for 3 months? I have nothing, right? So we needed a stipend to cover those things because we're talking about mostly black and brown people who have been hungry in class since the 1st and 2nd grade, right? We've been hungry in class, and you can't learn there the same, that way. The doctors will tell you that. You need to eat a nutritious meal before going to school. Right? You need to be full and you need to be healthy as you learn. We haven't been that since the 1st and 2nd grade. Now I'm 40 years old sitting in a class hungry, right? Needing a job to take care of myself and take care of my family. So that was an obstacle for us even in employment. Now that we have advocated and fought very hard, the jobs is plentiful now, but they wasn't always that way. Next from there is the hardest issue of them all, housing. Right? So this person has miraculously, somehow, some way, obtained their identification, their health care, has a job now. Right? Not minimum wage, This ain't $9, $10, $7, not like me. Right? We've got this person a job, they're making $18 an hour. Right? So now we're not even talking about affordable housing. Let's get that out of the equation, right? Because these is able-bodied men and women, they're working, right? And making a good wage. Don't need affordable housing, can't afford $1,300 a month. Well, who's gonna rent to them? Right? They're black, done been in prison, probably have children. Who's gonna rent to them? The landlords simply do not have to do it, they just don't. There's a guy moving here out of Utah, getting his job at Linden Tree, 700 credit score, white guy. They'd rather rent to him, right? He'll pay more, right? Never miss the bill. They'll give it to him and then overlook the person who has a criminal background, who is black, who is 9 times out of 10 from Charlotte, right? So that's the problem here when it comes to housing. Who we're talking about is true Charlotteans. We're not talking about black people that moved here from Cincinnati, Richmond, Virginia, with a degree, with the work history. They'll never live on Hovis Road. They move here and they move uptown, right? They move into these apartment complexes. They move into these communities. The black people that transplant here, right, jump over the true charlatans that's from here, see, because they're like me. They have a background, never been off a Hovis road. Nobody's never helped them, so nobody's going to rent to them. So much so that once the pandemic showed itself, these men and women were getting out of jails and getting out of prisons right here in Mecklenburg County, getting dropped off over there at the shelter. Their probation officer would speed away. Right. Here this person has been gone 10 years, come back in the dusk of dark, people have on masks, right? There's tents everywhere as he's going into the shelter. Goes into that shelter and they offer that man a tent. It's been gone 10 years, mama's died while he's away. Family's gone, it's on lockdown. They offered that man a tent. Somebody out there in the tent city said, maybe you ought to call Kenny, freedom fighters. If you've gotten out of jail, prison, maybe they'll help you. So that man, what do we do from there? In 2020, this is what happened. Because we have lack of resources, lack of funding, the government denied us for everything. All of the other bigger nonprofits denied us for everything. The good Lord himself instructed me not to go to the church. Kenny, they'll receive you as a beggar. You'll get mad at me, right? Because you'll go to the church saying, I'm helping people. Lord, I'm trying to help people get off of the street. They'll receive you as a beggar. You'll look up at me and say, where's God? So I didn't even go there, right, under his instruction. So where do these resources come from? They came from the community, $10 and $15, $20 at a time. Some of our witnesses are here. Tim Nicodemus, Greg Jarrell, and them sent $20, $25 at a time. When you multiply that times 100 people, or times 1,000 people, that is how we were able to sustain ourselves to do the work that we were doing in 2020 with limited resources. So this same person who was offered a tent, when he called us, we said, okay, well, we're going to have to get you in a hotel for at least 2 weeks. It'll take me that to get your identification, to make sure that you have your health care, to beg the government or somebody to help you after this 2 weeks. $1,200 is the cost of that hotel stay. Oh yeah, they raised the hotel rates during the coronavirus around here because they felt like the government was making the payments, so they raised them. All right. So that person is a pathway. Next from there, 2020, and the challenge that it was brought us over to 2021. So these problems that existed in 2020 for us, that was very tough, especially for me, because I'm the person out there, me and our staff, that's running around with the individuals themselves doing the work. Right? They're in my car, right, and they're with us. So for 2021, what did we have to do? I can get the next slide. We had to go and create a pathway for identifications, right? Because along this path, I'm meeting people, making connections, and building a network that we have now, an underground network, right? Because these systems, these government systems and these churches and these different organizations have people in them who care. Right? The organization can't do it because, you know, the rules and the processes and stuff say we just can't do it. But the people in there could. So they helped me to build a process for identifications with another small nonprofit, Just Do It movement. So now when someone needs identification, they go there and to the vote writers. Because the voting people have picked us up, right? Because you have to have an identification to vote. So now the voters say, okay, well, we'll help you get an identification because we want you to register to vote. And it doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, they have plenty of money in those PACs for that kind of stuff, right? So now we have a pathway for identification. So when that's part of our process now, they go there for identification. Again, they don't get funded, so what do we have to do? Raise money and fund them. Right? Because they ain't getting nothing from the government neither. So we got to raise money, 10, 15, 20, and then fund them. Same thing next. Slide in healthcare. Same issue. What do you do? What did we do? We had to create a program and create a way, and we did with Caring in Shenavia, Montgomery. Right? So all of our clients can now receive a dignified visit. Right? You're going into a doctor's office. They're not going to talk to you about money. Health insurance, we've already got that covered. They're just going to go in there and talk about your visit, and now they're doing it on the telemed, right? Because a part of the program is to provide our people with technology immediately. You're getting a cell phone, right, and instructions on how to use that cell phone so you can at least do your telemeds. That's not free. I just had to create a partnership with them at Caring, and we got to raise the money and do whatever we got to do when the invoices come and pay it. From that, once that was created, I spoke with the Mecklenburg County Public Health and Dr. Raynard Washington, and they decided that once those vouchers come in, then just forward them over to the county and they'll take care of them. Again, this was something that didn't exist at all in 2020 that exists now. Next from there is employment. Again, that was a struggle with the stipends and helping the men and women get to the classes. So we've been able to receive funding to help cover some of those costs, right? Enough to prove that the men and women who go through it in this way, it will work, and it does work. So we formed other partnerships with Erica's Closet, Charlotte Works. The biggest company that's here in Charlotte right now that's doing tremendous work in this area is Shep, because they have a model where they will hire men and women with a background and pay them their worth, right? So not just hire them and say, well, you're lucky to have a job. No, they're going to pay. If you get this job, well, you're just like everybody else. $20 an hour is where you start at. And you can work your way up to $28 an hour. Only thing you got to do is come to work. Right? We're going to talk to each individual about their background. Right? And if we determine that it's not public safety, that it won't cause anybody harm, then you can have this job here. You at least have the opportunity to have the job there. And that is what we're asking for the rest of the employers moving in here. Right? The big people. Bankers and financiers and the tech people. I know that you might not want me to have a job there with my background and I'm black. Well, let me be the janitor or something. Give me 1% of those jobs. 3,000, we're asking for 1%, 30 jobs. Be janitors or something, because we know that if I get in there, Honeywell or one of these places, there's a program in there that one of my children can get in that program and get that scholarship and maybe one day work there. We know that those programs exist in those companies, so that's what we ask for. Next from there, housing, which is still a struggle. Right? So what happens? You said, well, nobody will rent to the people, none of the apartment complexes, none of the landlords. Sometimes it comes down to money, right? Well, the person has a job, they have everything. Would you let this person in if I gave you $2,000 extra? Well, if I gave you $3,000, 10, right? We're going to go see her, because see if it's, what is it really about? 9 times out of 10, it's about money over public safety, right? You talking enough money, Kenny, we'll let that guy in here, right, over public safety. And a lot of times that is what ends up having to happen for permanent housing. So we are continuing to work on things that's more solid. We partner with Axoy Solutions, which is a local developer who constructed some housing on Cochran Drive, provided 7 houses for people who were homeless, didn't have nowhere to go. 3 of them that's living there now were calling me from their cars, been offered a tent, refused the tent, was living in their cars, pregnant woman. Right. That's right. She's now had her child over there in the new house that was provided under Axoy Solutions, who said that once we construct these places, we're not going to charge $1,500 a month like we can. We're going to charge $900 a month and include electricities and utilities and Wi-Fi, because we want the person to actually move forward, right? He said, well, I'm white and I'm already rich. My great-granddaddy was rich, Kenny. So right now I'm not thinking about money, right? I really want to help somebody. So that's who I partner with. We're working on more housing. Dream Key partners have agreed to partner with us in hopes of creating a down payment assistance program that's specific for criminal justice involved individuals. Because if you make it that far that you're talking about a home, we ought to help you. We know that this has been a long, arduous journey for you, and a bank is going to give you a pre-approval. We're going to help you the rest of the way. We have to as the community, and congratulate you with the standing ovation made it that far. Because we know there's no turning back from home ownership. That's universal. Commonwealth Charlotte partner with us to prepare these men and women for home ownership. You're going to need credit counseling, financial literacy. They're going to have to look at your credit, right? Because your credit is a certain kind of way when you're poor and you're black, right? Nobody's never really giving you nothing. Your credit's bad over $500 because that's all they give, your finger card. You don't have much on there, so you just need counseling. right, and instruction on how to build up your credit and how to maintain it. Commonwealth Charlotte provides that for our individuals. Home Again Foundation is the nonprofit organization that provided the housing under the Axoy Solutions. And Vicki Craighead Davis is the advocate who fought hard for the supportive services around these housing. Because it's one thing to build the house, it's another thing to help the person maintain it. Right? So the supportive services are very important with affordable housing and low-income housing, so the person doesn't get stuck there. Because if you just leave them there, they'll get stuck there. And Section 8 and these programs will allow you to do that for 5, 10, 15 years without helping you. So Vicki Craighead Davis had the model for supportive services that worked. Next, from there, brings us to where we're at. Now, having already did the work in 2020, having achieve some measure of success in 2021 so that the program is intact and there's a pathway for when a person calls us directly. Soon as we pick up the phone, there's a way for that person to go all the way through, depending on the individual themselves. So how does these things that we do tie in religiously, right? Because these things, I assure you, cannot be done without the good Lord himself. He has to reach down and touch the heart of the hardest men and women in Charlotte, who it's their job to say no, right? To screen these things, right? To look at things in this kind of way. Their heart has to be touched in order to give you that job, right? Or sometimes even to give you some information that can help you get housing or help you get that job. So again, the good Lord himself, it's all in the midst of these things dating back many thousands of years ago. This stuff is not new, people being imprisoned, right? And the call comes out from the Bible. Check on those who are in prison. Right? Go and see about them, right? The sick and the shut-in. So just like being released from incarceration, well, there's a transformation that happens there, right? That's why they call it re-entry. And they say, well, we have to rehabilitate. Well, the same thing happens when someone new comes into Christ, right? We know that you're new into Christ, right? All those old things are passed away now, right? And the church, we're going to have to come together. That's why it's important you come here and fellowship with us, because we're going to have to stick beside you in this new transition that you're going through, right? This new walk that you're taking, right? And somebody's going to help guide you with the scripture. Somebody's going to help guide you along the way, and we're going to be there for you, right? Same thing, right? Reentry. You get released from the hospital having experienced some type of injury. They're going to provide a way for you, right? Because of that, what have your legs cut off now, Miss Annie? And you're going to have to learn how to do things a different kind of way. Someone's going to help you with that, right? You're not going to just be totally helpless. You're going to still be able to you can still work. Somebody's going to help you with that. Same thing in the work that we do, right? There is a transition, and someone has to help you with that. If they do not help you with that, then you'll probably fail, right? You won't be able to make it through the transition on your own, even as a new Christian, right? You don't become saved and they send you out there on your own. You go out there, help people, bring them to the Lord. No, it doesn't work. You're going to need help to do that, and instruction to do that. So as I was arguing my case to the government and to the hospital care systems to help us, that is what I had to argue, that if you're black and you're from Charlotte, you have a criminal background, in fact, you have a disability, right? That's equivalent to a one-armed man or a blind man. The difference is the blind man has a place to go, the place for the blind, and they'll help you, right? You have a disability, you go to the place for the disabled, they're going to help you. But the man or woman getting out of jail and prison here, and there's no help for him, there's no direction for them to go, there's no building that man or woman walks into. This is the building that they help returning citizens at. It just didn't exist in Charlotte. And it still doesn't exist in the way that it needs to. So here we are crying out, right, to the community, now to the church, to the government, to come and assist us in some kind of way. Because the reality of it is this in a Christian standpoint. for better understanding. The men and women that we're talking about, well, that's a leper, right? You've got all of these things up against you. Nobody will touch you, come close to you, or help you. You're a leper. The thing is in Charlotte, well, it's the leper and his mother, right? It ain't just the leper. It's the leper and their mother who are stuck and doesn't have anything, right? And it is the city official walking past them, right? It is the church man, the pastor, gonna walk past them, right? Right here in Charlotte, every day, the county commissioner walk past them. The big banker walk past them, tax collector walk past that person, leper and his mother that was laying there needing help. Until somebody stopped there and offered them some help, right? And said, well, why is all of these people walking by you and nobody's offered to help you? And that person who lent the hand, when I got with that person and said, well, maybe we should pray, right? We'll call on the Lord, right? And that person said, well, I don't believe in your Lord and your God, because if they existed, this wouldn't exist this way, right? Standing there, needing help. Why is that so? And all of these people are passing by them. Where's your big bad God at now? Is what she questioned me. I said, well, I'll help. Me and you, we'll get together and we'll do something for the leper and his mother right here on the train track needing help, right? That everybody's went past them. And we got with that person and their mother, right? And did everything that we could do, raise money, put them in a hotel room where they stayed at for 3 months. Till we begged the county, right, to get them into a hotel. They got them over there into the COVID hotel, where they're still at. To this day, 83 years old, the mother, right, sister, right, and her son, who's a leper, because he's black, he has mental health, substance abuse, and a criminal background. Nobody will touch him. Nobody will get to know him. You see him all the time at the stoplights. He's a panhandler. Right. Nobody will touch him because he's a leper. And his mother, who loves him, right, she's there with him by his side. They're there right now as we speak in the COVID hotel. They've called me last week, Kenny, you're going to have to come and get your people. We're closing this place down. Not Kenny, here's the money, here's the resources, right? Millions of dollars have went into this. A home has been prepared for that, Kenny. We're going to take care of the leper and his mother. No, come and get your people, Kenny. This place is closing down. Is the reality of what's going on here. So what do we need? We need the church, right? Who ought to be out there with me, right? Marching and protesting to the government, demanding, hey, something's not right here. Where's our money going? Right? Why is that leper laying there with his mother needing help and nobody won't help him? Surely we can build a structure for them and put them there, right? That's what the church ought to be doing. That's not going on because the church is looking at it in the way that man is looking at it, in the way that government is looking at it. And that's not my issue. That's not why I'm sitting here. That's not why the good Lord put these words into my mouth, right? Because if you get stuck thinking that if we build this structure for this person, put them in there, right, that they're going to be all right, well, you're missing the whole point. The point of it is for that person to see you going above and beyond your way to help them. And for them to question you, why are you helping me this way nobody else has? Why are you doing that? Then you're supposed to boldly say, well, it's Jesus Christ in me. It ain't me. It's the good Lord who's doing this through me, right? And we're not talking about this place right here, this structure, this house, this mansion. No, we're talking about an eternal home that's there in heaven. That we want you to get there, right, where everything is better there, right, where there's no suffering and stuff there, right? You won't have to go through those things there. That is the message, right, that sometimes that you have to get out there and get in the midst of things, right, to be able to get that message through, right, that there's an eternal home, right? Nobody's going to be homeless when they get there. You don't have to worry about affordable housing there. Right? You don't have to worry about racism there, right? You don't have to worry about gentrification and those things there, right? And that's the message. And that can come from a white man or a black man, young or old. That message is very simple. And I am not a preacher. Never wanted to be one, right? Because if I was, I wouldn't be here. I'd have something more important to do. Preacher man's busy today, right? They don't got time for this, right? So I'm not a preacher. These are just simple things, right? Love your neighbor as you would yourself. That's something simple, right? And that's something that we all can do, right? Because if we just did that, nothing else. You don't have to do nothing else in the Bible. Forget about everything else that's in there. Just do that. Just love your neighbor as you would yourself, right? And everything else will fall into play. Well, how do I do that, Kenny? Love my neighbor as myself. I don't want to lose anything. No. That doesn't mean you lose anything. That doesn't mean you give up anything, right? It means that you want your neighbor to have what you have, right? You don't want to have less and them have less. You want them to have what you have, right? Nice TV, nice home, air conditioning, nice vehicle, a job, an opportunity for your children in a way to leave them something. That's what you want your neighbor to have, just as you have. And if you just thought like that, right, acted like that, you will begin to see your neighbors have those things, even if it's nothing in thought, because you're thinking on it every day. Right? I don't want to lose what I got, Lord, but I do want Joe out there to have something. Get out there with Joe. Doesn't mean literally get out there with Joe. Sometimes that means talk about Joe at your dinner table. Talk about Joe to your pastor. Right? Talk about Joe to your uncle. No, he ain't really never cared about a black man, but that's all right. Right? Talk to them about that. Have those conversations. Right? Don't be scared of being ostracized. We know those things is a real fear. Getting out there, standing up for black people, standing up for poor people. People will have something to say about that, your own family and friends. But you have to boldly say no more. Right? Claim Christ. Use the good Lord. Right? The Lord's instructed me to say this. The Lord's instructed me to do this, to act this way, to look upon my neighbor as he's actually my neighbor, even though they're not dressed like me, didn't go to the same school as I did, didn't live on the same. That's your neighbor, right? Over on Hovis Road. South Carolina, Virginia, that's your neighbor. Mexico, Canada, that's your neighbor. If you go around the globe, that's your neighbor. And if you was just to love them, care for them, comfort them, then these is issues that we wouldn't have to discuss. We'd be discussing something else, the climate, right? Because everybody would have a home and an opportunity, so we could talk about something else. And that is always my charge and my ask to the community. You ain't got to give me nothing. Give it to Joe, right? You ain't got to do nothing for me. Do something for Joe, right? Something that's meaningful for him, that he can carry on his life and be self-sufficient. And one day tell somebody, if it hadn't been for that lady in that church praying with me, I don't know where she's at now. Never seen her no more after that. She prayed for me, and my life turned around from that day. She told me, go over there to that place, tell them Ann sent you, and they're going to give you a job if you tell them Ann sent you. And that man is working, making $20-some an hour, never seen Ann again in life, right? So a lot of times you're not going to get no reward that's going to be instant. You may never know, right, the work of the Lord, right? That's why he's described as mysterious in his ways, right? It's not for us to know those things. So share those things boldly. Claim them to those boldly. And again, I'm not a preacher, not a sanctified man, right? I've been baptized. My grandmother prayed for this day. That's how I made it. She's been going on now, so we living off of prayers, right? That our grandmothers, they prayed for us, prayed for my future, right? She said, well, if you live to be 30, I'm going to pray for you at 30 because I know what happens at 30 and 35 and 40. If you get to 40 years old, I got to pray for you because that's when the enemy kicks it up in a high gear then. Right, as you get older, right? He loves an old fool, the enemy, right? And she prayed for those things, for me and my children and their children, right? So I am telling the mothers, right, of the church and the sisters of the church, right, that's older than we are now. Don't you fear not. The good Lord who you've trusted all these years, right, down on bending knee, who you've prayed to, is raising up men and women, right, across this land, across this nation, right, to prepare us for these times, because somebody has to get up there and speak. Those guys, they're going to pass away. Nobody can live forever, right? Your pastor, he's not going to live forever. I'm sorry. He's going to have to go, and somebody's going to have to replace him. And the Lord is preparing us now and giving us a message for that generation. They're behind us, right? They're there in the jail, they're on the streets, they're twerking, they're on the video, they're out there, right? Somebody has to speak to them, your children and their children. Who do you think it's going to be? Not your pastor's pastor. They don't have the message, right? Not that the good Lord won't give it to them, but they'd have to seek it. They'd have to get out there and know these men and women who we're talking about, these youth who we're talking about, your children who we're talking about, right? White and black alike, right? Because just because this guy's black, well, he could be best friends with your son, right? They're influencing one another, right? You teach your son about Christ, his mama, she'll teach his son that one day they'll talk about Christ, right? They'll talk about twerking, they'll talk about all of the other things, right? But if you teach your son about Christ and she teaches her son about Christ, one day, right, your children will talk about Christ to one another. We've done it, right? All our life growing up should have memories of talking as a youth about Christ, about God, about prayer, right? Those things are still going on. So I encourage everyone that's under the sound of my voice to do those things, to continue to pray, right? And to be aware, right? And know that that harvest is plentiful out there as soon as you leave from here. And that person that you see, that panhandler, has a mother, right? That person that you see out there that's houseless and doesn't have anywhere to go is a person, is a human being, right? And that person with the criminal background is still somebody, right? Because that person could be like Paul was, one-time Saul. People remembered him when he was Saul. I remember that guy, he was Saul. And when he was Saul, he did this and that. No way that he could ever change. And then there was people who remembered when Paul was Saul and said there must be a God, because I remember when that guy was Saul and he's now Paul, changed man. I want some of what the new Paul's got, right? Because I remember that guy. So it goes both ways. My time is winding down to 1 minute. So good, let me use that last 60 seconds to talk some more about Paul, right? Who used to be Saul. Right. And I am him, right? I am Kenny now, but I used to be Flip, and used to be these other names and stuff, right, that I'm not that no more, right? And there's still people to this day say, ain't no way. I knew that guy, selling cocaine, driving big cars, had guns and all that. I remember that guy in and out of jail. Ain't no way. He must be tricking everybody, right? And then there's some people, right, and their mother and their grandmothers, right, who say that God is real, right? Because I knew this guy, he ought to be dead. They shot him. He ought to be doing 10,000 years in prison, that there must be a God, and there is one in this work. So please continue to support our work. How can you help us? Go there, make some donations. It will go to people in need. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kenny. We have some questions for you. We got a question for you, Kenny. Thank you so much. That was tremendous. He said, I got a minute. I'll talk about what I know. I'll talk about Paul all day. I ain't mad at you. Kenny, there were two questions that kind of reflect the same thing. So what can we do now while our family members are currently incarcerated to help them re-enter in a healthy way? Same thing from somebody. What can we do to help somebody who's been removed from society? How do we walk alongside people when they re-enter?
The best thing that we could do for someone who is still incarcerated is provide them support and work on the network that they'll be coming out to. Right? Reach out to those of us that's already in the work. It is 80% easier when we have that advanced knowledge, right? That the person is coming home on the 15th versus the person's home and has nowhere to go today. Right? So we can prepare a pathway for that person. So please reach out to us and other reentry nonprofits ahead of that person coming out. We'll get them on a list, and we'll be able to pick up the correspondence with them from there for you and have a pathway for housing, for employment, for other things that you may not be able to think of that that person will need. Again, those things are moving forward better now than they was when I was released, because of the advocacy work that we have been doing. So there's definitely a pathway for that person.
That's good. Thank you so much, Mr. Robinson. Kenny, we thank you.